Welcome back. We've got a fantastic show for all of you today. Today, Julie and I are focusing on 7 counteroffer moves top agents use to seal big deals. And this is obviously 7 points, and these are really fantastic notes. I'll show you guys the notes. It's a two-pager.
It is.
It's a
We might not
two-pager.
get to all of them, but we'll see how it goes.
Right, but you're going to want these notes, and obviously we prepared these notes for our newsletter. So if you want the newsletter, or if you want the notes, you got to subscribe to the newsletter. And the best part is, I'm sure all of you will agree, the newsletter doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to. Just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. Harrisrealestatedaily.com is our exclusive newsletter. It is a place where we put obviously our day's notes for that show for that particular day, but we also put a video of the podcast, and we also do a lot of exclusive content. Julie and I have created a lot of extra stuff just for newsletter subscribers, because frankly, it's been such a huge success. Something like 20,000 of you subscribe or have subscribed, and we have a huge open rate, huge everything. So you're really appreciating the information. We're frankly loving doing it as well. So yes, do subscribe to the newsletter. Do that right away. Just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. All you've got to do is drop your email address in the little bar, and then you've got to pop over to your normal email, and you've got to double opt in confirming you want the subscription. Julie Harris, let's just jump right in. Why is this an especially relevant topic in today's market?
Yes, well, as you mentioned, we're talking about 7 counteroffer moves top agents use to seal big deals. Now, we've had several coaching clients, podcast listeners, who have requested some more help with negotiating, because gone are the days, for the most part, where it's just about picking the best of 20 offers, right? Or maybe you had to waive an inspection or an appraisal contingency, but negotiating really was not quite as hairy as it's become. So a lot of agents have asked about things like home sale contingencies and what constitutes a lowball. Every agent that looks at something, anything less than full list price or over list price, is labeled a lowball. So we're going to clarify a lot of that. In the fast-paced world of real estate, a shaky counteroffer, or worse, no counteroffer at all, can kill a deal faster than you can say closing costs. According to NAR, 68% of home sales in 2024 involved at least one counteroffer. That's up hugely over previous years. And this is looking like the same thing, especially because in the country, we're averaging about 5% more inventory, but there are places where inventory is up by 20%. Why do you care? Because if your buyer doesn't get in contract right away, the listing agent can't just say, well, stand in line, I've got 10 other offers. They can just go buy something else. So it does matter. Mastering negotiation is non-negotiable for agents aiming for bigger commissions, and I would say commissions closer together. So we've got 7 proven counter offer strategies. And Tim, did we tell them how to get these in the newsletter? Because there are a lot of notes.
Okay. Well, I'm reading your notes actually as you were reading your introduction, and I was thinking it's not an exact checklist, but this would be a great checklist for somebody in anticipation of having to do a lot of negotiation. It gives you the overview. And remember, guys, these are just our notes from today's podcast. And we know you guys love the podcast. It's always one of the most downloaded podcasts in our section on iTunes every single day. The rankings come out every single day, and we're usually top 50, sometimes top 25 in our section on iTunes. And that is really I think it's a testament not just to the work we do, but the fact that you guys appreciate the work we do and you're using this information for your own betterment and also for helping your customers. And that's the reason we keep doing it. It's very motivational for us. But again, get these notes, go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. Julie, point number 1, anchor your counter with market data and net sheets. Let me set this up a little bit better. So if you had received an offer, now, even if let's assume that it's going to be an offer that's going to make the seller a little bit squeamish. And those come in sometimes. And sometimes you have to emotionally prepare. By the way, one of the best times to emotionally prepare the seller for a lowball offer or for an offer that's lower than what the seller expected is way before you receive it. That way the emotional, the emotional brunt of the sense of fear of loss of their less than high inflated price, the aspirational pricing bubble popping in their minds, that causes a lot of negative emotions. So one of the in addition to Julie's notes, is always be preparing them for the reality that in this market, it's expected that we're going to receive offers. And don't be surprised if we receive some offers that are not in alignment with your expectations, because a lot of buyers have been reading too many doom and gloom headlines, thinking that the sellers are somehow fire sale their properties. So if we receive receive one of those offers, Mr. Seller, here's the script, listeners or viewers, if you're on YouTube. is that Mr. Seller, and this is if you receive an offer that's less than what the seller expected, less than maybe even what you expect, maybe just a ridiculous, stupid offer. Mr. Seller, listen, I appreciate the fact that you're angry about the offer that we received from these buyers and from this buyer's agent. And I get it. I totally agree with you. This offer is not in alignment with what the market tells us the property's worth. But let's just remember, we shouldn't be angry at this buyer. We should be maybe thinking about the fact that at least this buyer liked the house enough to make an offer on the property, take the time to write an offer. And so maybe they're just, this is just the first, they're
A
negotiating.
starting point.
It's a starting point. That's all it is. So let's not feel angry that these sellers or that these buyers are writing us a low offer or a low ball offer. Let's just take into consideration the fact that, you had 14 showings in the property and this is the one offer that we have. So let's make the most of it. And Mr. Seller, I know I told you this when we took the listing, but according to essentially every research that's ever been done on offers on properties, that almost always your first offer, even if it comes in a little bit lower than you're expected after negotiated, almost always your first offer is your best offer, because the longer a property sits in the market, the less value it becomes in the eyes of the buyer and frankly the buyer's agents. So with that in mind, when you're presenting the offer to the buyer or the seller rather, you should be anchoring your counter and your offer before you present it with market data and net sheets. Julie?
Well, so for example, everything you said, and I remember many times where you would call sellers ahead of time. And similarly, when you've got a second or a third showing, you would call them ahead of time and say, look, they are comparing your house to 2 other homes, and we're lucky to get this second showing from them. So I know that the other 2 houses are about $30,000 less than where we're priced. So I'm not sure where they're going to come in. And so what that did, and I think that you will agree with this because we observed this, this is a great lesson, is that when you have, we used to call that the call before the call before really presenting the actual offer, assuming you were going to get one. And that's usually after talking to the buyer's agent who might have said to you ahead of time, hey, they love the house, but man, they've got these other 2 offers and they're priced less and they've got more bells and whistles, whatever. So you would call the seller and sort of pre-program them that it might come in low. And here's what's interesting. Let's say it takes 2 or 3 days, then you got another second showing. Maybe you live through another open house and they still don't have that offer. During that 2 or 3 days, that seller or that seller couple is going to be like, God, how low could we accept? They're thinking. And what was interesting is they're in their minds are almost always going to go lower than where that offer is going to come in.
After they've had, but after, if you hit them with a low offer, so what Julie just said, it's perfect. And oh my gosh, my head is filling with scripts that we don't have time to do.
Memories.
Totally. I have probably 5 scripts I could give you guys right now. But the moral of the story is that what she said, the call before the call. And the call before the call happens quite literally, the call to present the offer. But you also need to be preparing, as I said, the seller for potential price adjustments, or don't say it like that, potential repositioning of the house in the market to correctly reflect the buyer's expectations. Excuse me. You need to do that really the second you take the listing, and don't have those conversations necessarily with the seller until after you've taken the listing, because that's really what you're getting paid for your expertise. So what you're doing is you're preparing them for how to translate what the market is going to tell us based on the number of showings, lack of showings, the feedback, make sure you're getting feedback, and the time on the market. So if you've given them, set the expectations so that longer days on the market is not good, fewer showings is not good. You've done all the work. When it comes time for you to actually, you finally have maybe it's your own offer or maybe it's an offer from somebody else, it's really important that you call them and now I'm not going to say lower their expectations, but I'm going to say have them reset their expectations so they're more realistic. That way, if the offer comes in higher, you're going to have moved. They're going to be, obviously very happy about that. But if the offer comes in lower than what they expect, they're not going to react negatively towards you. Because if you do this wrong, and this is terrible, but this is what happens. If you do this wrong and you present a low ball, as in the seller's eyes, offer to the seller, they could get so pissed off that they'll fire you. And that includes even your best friend from high school, your center of influence past client seller, because
or they might reject a perfectly good offer just because you haven't done this positioning.
Right.
So I agree with everything that you said. I want to show our listeners how to use some facts, because our point number 1 is how to use market data and net sheets. And you want to take every subject property by itself. So let me give 2 examples. Facts trump feelings in negotiations. You're going to ground your counteroffer with a fresh comparable market analysis. Things happen while you're sitting on the market, right? To validate your position. Or you might use your fresh CMA to do what Tim was just talking about, to position your seller. It depends on how it goes. So let's look at first scenario. If your comparables show recent sales closing at 101% of list price, use this to justify countering a lower offer with a data-backed number, right? For example, you could say, based on the following comparables, we're countering at X. That doesn't mean you're coming in at full list back at them, but you can say, because the past three sales came in at 101% over what we're currently listed at, and your offer is only 92%. So we're going to counter offer you based on our comparables. That buyer's agent might not even be using the same comparables. Now,
let's take a breath. Let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay. So really what Julie's trying to help you guys understand is, when you're on the listing side of things, the worst thing for you to do is assuming the buyer's agent has done their job. So what Julie's telling you how to do, what she's telling you what to do, is how to essentially present the actual factual current market data to the buyer's agent, assuming it's not you, and to the seller. So everyone's operating off the same set of data points. And if the buyer's agent then sees the data, agrees that these are the most recent comps, and their buyer still comes in at a lower price, then that's probably not a serious buyer. Or frankly, the buyer's agent doesn't have the skill set to get the deal together. But at least
or the buyer might not be qualified to come in at list price.
That's true. But Julie, let's move on to point number 2. All right.
Sure.
So point number 2 is uncover their true priorities. What do you mean by that point?
Well, price isn't always the number one thing, is it? To negotiate effectively, call the other agent and ask, no matter what side you're on, call the other agent and ask, what's the most important thing to your client? They might still say price, but you can say price and what else? I recently had a new coaching client come to us because they said, I can't believe what happened. I thought I wrote the perfect offer. I said that we could close in 2 weeks and it's all cash. But I was surprised to find out that the seller didn't want to close in 2 weeks. They wanted a 2-month lease back.
Right.
An otherwise great contract, assuming that price was the number one thing and assuming that the seller, like their seller, wanted to close right away. And yet they lost that position. So find out what's actually important. For example, is it, closing costs? Maybe a buyer comes in lower than the seller wants and asks for closing costs, but if the seller counters a little bit over list and gives them the closing costs, now you've got a deal. So what's the most important thing in addition to, or maybe even instead of, price? We have a lot of coaching clients that report that they were not the highest offer, but they were the strongest buyer. That might make a difference too. So uncovering their true priorities, no matter what side you're on. And then point number 3, diffuse emotions with empathy. Lowball offers can spark frustration, but emotional sellers will derail the deal. And by the way, anything, especially in today's kind of post-COVID era, low interest rate, crazy market, most sellers will call anything less than list a lowball offer. So even though it's not to you, in their mind, they're going to call it that.
Julie,
So
let's interject here. Point 2 and 3 are kind of the same. Well, not really completely, but mostly it's about knowing the motivation. So
Yes.
Julie's presenting this to you guys as if you're on the list side, and she's suggesting that you obviously find out as much motivational things about the buyer when you're receiving an offer, but also you better have pre-qualified your seller when you took the listing and know exactly what's most important to them. And she also said something that's really important. You guys will be shocked how frequently the price is not the most, and if it's the most important thing to the seller, or to the buyer rather, it's probably because they barely qualify for the house they're making an offer on. And again, you're going to be stuck in situations oftentimes where the buyer's agent hasn't really fully pre-qualified their buyer. So you're going to have to sort of, it's a bit of a fishing expedition sometimes, unfortunately, but at least know the motivation of your seller. And if you're on the buyer side of things, like for example, again, I don't want to give too many stories about this because it's Julie and I'll just ramble forever. But you might find that, for example, a seller does not really, if you ask them what the top 5 priorities they are, it's going to most always be the convenience. That's going to be number 1 almost always. In other words, are they going to have to move twice? Are they going to be able to go seamlessly from one house to the next, assuming that's the scenario? Those types of things. You might find that it's going to be that they don't want to screw around with inspections, or you might find that they want to move their pet cemetery. We've had all of this in all of our coaching
Real
clients.
story.
We could tell you guys thousands of stories.
Yeah.
You might find that the buyer actually doesn't mind paying full list price, but they want the seller's pool table and hot tub. You guys got to dig into all these things. But approaching this as if the most important thing is the price is a mistake, because what's the most important to most people is convenience. Is most important to most people is the least amount of stress. And you got, again, amateurish mistake. Don't get stuck on the whole, I'm looking for a good deal, or those types of things that buyers will often say. Mr. Buyer, I appreciate that. I hear a lot of folks saying that they're looking for a good deal. What does a good deal mean to you? And when they say what a good deal means to them, it might just be, well, I want to be able to move in before school starts. I want to be able to move in and have the, essentially make it so that I can move from the closing of my existing house to the next one. Hopefully you're understanding price is not always the most important thing. And if you get stuck on price and you essentially lose contact with the fact that people make decisions emotionally, usually not analytically, you're going to lose transactions. You're going to be a terrible negotiator because you're forgetting that you're dealing with someone's home on the seller side and you're dealing with someone's potential home on the buyer side. Obviously,
It's a stressful thing to move, right? I mean, it's always in the top
totally.
3 or 4 things that people list, right?
And
So
Julie, it's a good point in here. If you guys, we're going to continue doing our masterminds as long as you guys continue wanting us to do them. They're free. You can join one of our masterminds this week. I think Julie and I have scheduled ourselves for 3 again this week. With these masterminds are fantastic. Every time we do them, more and more people are attending. A lot of people are attending more than once, which is great. But just go to harrismastermind.com and you can register for free. The link is down below. And let me tell you what we're doing on these masterminds is we're focusing on helping you guys overcome the 3 biggest challenges. We're not just telling you what the challenges are. We're telling you what the challenges are, and we're giving you actual drill down solutions to these challenges. So the 3 biggest challenges agents are having now in their real estate businesses, and you can attend this mastermind for free. Just go to harrismastermind.com or click the link below in the show description. We're having a lot of fun doing them. And based on the feedback, you guys are having a lot of fun attending them. So just go to harrismastermind.com. The last one was about 2 hours long with the questions. So that gives you an idea of how much we're drilling down and truly helping you guys solve for those 3 biggest challenges. All right, Julie, let's move on to point number 4.
Point number 4 is close the gaps with the split the difference strategy. This is something that, we have a generation of agents that haven't had to think this way, right? So for example, let's say you're $20,000 apart. And maybe the seller freaked out. How the heck did I come down $20,000? We'll split the difference, right? So come down 10,000 and meet them halfway. Again, massive amount of communication back and forth is to your advantage. I think that probably 50% of deals don't happen because agents aren't asking these types of questions. Is what if we meet you in the middle, right? So split the difference. And another secret that goes along with that is don't let any deal die while it's on your plate. Don't be responsible for the negotiation ending with you. Always have a way to come back. Maybe you have to split the difference twice and you land on an acceptable price. Maybe you split the difference and you give closing costs. Go ahead.
Let me give an advanced player tip. All right. So this is for advanced players only. You can tell our daughter loves video games. So when you sometimes in some of these negotiations, this is going to happen at all price points. This especially happens in the upper end price ranges. Most of Julie's clients are selling, $1 million house plus houses all the time. And for some reason during a negotiation, it's socially acceptable on behalf of buyers and sellers to suggest that the agents kick in. Guys ever had that happen before?
Yuck.
So I'm going to give you a little advanced player tip. When you are facing down the loss of a transaction that could, potentially mean a very nice commission check, and they ask you to contribute, don't contribute a percent, contribute a flat amount, because normal humans, I could quiz any of you guys to figure out 2.5 or 3% of any number instantly. And even if you were terrible at math, you'd be able to magically do it in your head, right? Mm-hmm. So that's called realtor math. You could do it quite easily, but consumers don't think in terms of percents. Consumers are going to think in terms of dollar amounts. So even if you have the most some guy that just is absolutely he'll go to the grocery store and argue about the price of eggs, right? Every single thing in this guy's life is about a negotiation. He always feels like he has to get a good deal. You might be one of those people yourself, all right? So here's the technique. Don't offer a commission. Oh, I'll lower your commissions to 3%. I'll lower my commission, my buyer agent commission to, no, don't do that. Do a flat fee. $500, $1,000.
It'll always be less.
Always be less than what a percent would be. And they'll all, because most times when people are negotiating, again, this was advanced player tip, they're just doing it to do it. They're just doing it because they feel like they're supposed to. Could be cultural. It just could be because they're jerks. It
Yeah,
could
they
just be,
want something. It doesn't have to be a percent, is your
right.
point. They
It could
just want to
be,
feel like you're part of the game, right? And they
especially,
want something.
especially when something's being ground and when the price or something's being grinded on a little bit, and they ask for it. Don't ever offer any of your commission unless you've exercised, and if you don't know how to negotiate, you won't have gotten to this point. You guys who negotiate right away offering your commission, that is just a lack of skill that you can make up when you join Premier Coaching, and it's costing you a lot of money. That's the go-to negotiation tactic for most agents. They just kick in. Inspection problem, I'll just pay for it. Any kind of problem, I'll just pay for it. Don't do it that way. It's not your house. I mean, look, you can, this is a joke, but you guys can kick in commission if you're going to participate in the appreciation, right? So if the seller or the buyer is going to include you on future appreciation bonuses, right, when they sell the house in 7 years, then okay, you're more than willing to help, make an investment into the transaction, but you are, you deserve to be paid the most the market will pay. And the most the market will pay has already been dictated when the commission's set, when you negotiate your commission. So do not give up your commission. It's, that's lack of skill. Hopefully I've made that point, not offended anybody, but if absolutely pressed, if facing down the loss of a transaction, you can and should contribute a dollar amount. And a dollar amount, like Julie said, and make it small. And you'll be shocked. Like normally you would, let's say you're doing a, commission, the commission is $30,000 and, whatever comes to pass that you have, and someone's pressuring you to put in $10,000 and you just done it in the past. So, okay, whatever, I'll just chip in a percent, whatever, don't do it. Instead say, you know what? I agree with you. Let's just do it this way. Let's just go. I'll put in $1,500 to help you. And they'll say, okay, because it's their ego just wanting to have them feel like they
Win.
won. Exactly. It's all it is. And by the way, a lot of times when you're dealing with cranky sellers about pricing, it's also just their ego wanting to feel like they're right. Most times conflict in life, but especially when people are under pressure, comes down to them wanting to feel like they're right. And if you are on the right side of their egos and aren't in conflict with it, you're going to win. So you put them in situations where they can feel like they won, and don't make a big deal of it. When you negotiate something, when you help them through a problem, don't make it about you. Don't pat yourself in the back. Don't take a victory lap. I really negotiated all this. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear how you've helped them solve a problem. If this doesn't resonate with you, a few more transactions from now, it will. Because really, at the end of the day, if you've not run into problems like this, it's because you haven't done enough deals. You will run into problems like this, especially as you do more transactions. And a market like this that's changing, it's going to be completely normal for you to have to feel like you're over negotiating every deal. Remember the little advanced player tip I just gave you. All right, Julie, point number 5, push for commitment with a closing question. What do you mean by that?
Yes. Okay. And you'll remember if you go into the time machine here that we would do this as well. And I would never forget when we learned to do this. I never thought it would work. And then we tried it and it did. And that's simply asking the question, instead of assuming that you're going to have to negotiate because you saw the offer and now you're freaking out and you're making the mistake as an agent. Oh my gosh, they're never going to, they're never going to take this. It's going to be knocked down, drag out. Be quiet and just ask them, what would happen if we simply accepted this offer?
Mm-hmm.
And then don't say anything. Now it helps to give them a net sheet, especially if most sellers are in a pretty good equity position right now. So give them a net sheet and say, gosh, if we accepted this offer, you're walking away with X couple $100,000 and you'll be able to make your move. And then highlight the good things about the offer. This is a 30-day close. They're giving you a 30-day free lease back. What would happen if we just accepted that? Now, the key to this is you can't say anything after that. What would happen if we just accepted it and let them think about it? And the amount of times that they say, well, I guess we could make that work. Don't you remember, learning that and
totally.
being shocked when
Completely.
sometimes they didn't want to fight about it?
The key thing is keeping your ego as a listing agent or buyer's agent out of it and just shutting up and letting them make a decision. Because even if they were the most, I'm going to get my price no matter what, and blah, blah, blah. What happens is days on the market, wears them down. Showings wear them down. Having to keep the house wears them down. The looming date where they potentially own 2 homes wears them down. Their own, just the normal life. I mean, you cannot treat your clients and think for your clients, you have to let them make their own decisions. They're grown ass adults, right? So when you get an offer in, by the way, this technique also works with home inspections. So when you get
Yes.
an offer in, what you should do, Julie just said, is you need to prep the offer, do a net sheet for them, send it over to them ahead of time, and tell them you're going to call them in about an hour after they've had a chance to review it. And you don't show up with your preconceived notions how they're going to react. Just keep your mouth shut and see what they have to say. Because like Julie just said, you'll be shocked how frequently, even the one that's, oh, I'm going to get my 750 or you all can just, blah, 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 blah. And the offer comes in at 725. They're like, okay. And of just, going back to my example of the home inspection, you are representing a seller or even a buyer. The home inspection comes back with a litany of garbage that needs to be done. Don't go and negotiate it and blah, 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 blah. Just go and send it over to the buyer or the seller and say, well, here's the home inspection. Let me know what you think. And it's even better if you just like do that digitally. Email it over to them, let them send it, say it's coming over, and then follow up with them and say, well, you have any questions about the home inspection? What would you like to do? And they'll say, well, I'll just fix all the stuff. Or they'll say,
You know what they usually say? We already knew about all that.
exactly. And they didn't put it on their property disclosure form. Yeah, exactly. They'll say, oh, yeah, we already knew the roof was going to need replaced. We already knew the furnace was like, all these things. They're going to say, okay, well, it makes sense that they would have found all these things. Whereas if you go to the seller, let's just keep this on the listing side, and you look at the property inspection, you're like, let's say the total, value of all the crap that needs to be fixed is like 15 grand. And you go and I'm going to prove my value to the seller. And you go and I'm going to beat up the other agent. You call him and the seller, and you say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to this, and we're going to the other thing. We're going to do all this crafty crap that I just thought of. And we're going to blah, 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 blah. And the seller's thinking to themselves, well, not saying anything. They're thinking, well, I would have fixed all that stuff, but if you want to spend your time and beat your head against the wall, and then you go back and over negotiate on the buyer side, and the buyer agent just basically cancel the contract. And the seller, in the back of their mind, even though they never told you, they would have expected, and would have fixed or at least given a concession to the buyer for those repairs that were needed on the house. That seller now didn't tell you that. Okay. Bad seller. But because you didn't keep the deal on contract and you lost that contract, guess what's going to happen? They're going to fire you. It might be right away, or it might be when the listing expires and they end up listing with somebody else. You guys get the point? Or you're probably not going to get referrals from them. So when you get something in, you do not run it through your filters. You're doing the transaction, but you don't know what's going on in that client's mind and their life. Send it over to them. What do you think? And see what they have to say. Hopefully that's helping a lot of you guys. We're just giving you an overview. This is our podcast. Obviously, we focus a lot on all these techniques in Premier Coaching. You can learn more about that. The link to join Premier Coaching is below, or you can just go to premiercoaching.com. What we're doing on this podcast is we're helping to open your mind. And when you hear something and it feels like knowledge that you already had, it's because we were essentially, what a really good coach does is they don't answer questions. They give you good questions. Our job isn't to come up with the answers all the time. Our job is to give you the great questions and you self-discover the answers. That's what coaching is. This podcast is, we're just training. So this is not coaching. Don't be confused. Because when we just tell you something like what we do on this podcast, you're absorbing maybe 10%. But when you're being coached, you're absorbing like 90% because you're self-discovering the answers. That's really what true coaching is. And please don't be confused. This is training, and hopefully you'll agree that it's great training because we certainly put our hearts and souls into it. Next point, Julie, point number 6, distinguish lowball offers from market-based offers. What do you mean by that?
Yes, as we said earlier, in today's market, most of the time sellers are going to think anything less than list or over list, they're going to say, oh, they lowballed me. Okay, but was it really a lowball? Not every offer is. If new comparables show recent sales below your list price, the offer might be actually very reasonable and your listing might be overpriced. So is it an overpriced listing with a reasonable offer on it? Or is it a correctly priced listing where the buyer needs to come up?
You should inject in there.
Scenarios.
Right. So it's not just resale. You guys in many markets, most markets are competing against new construction. So don't just focus on what the new builders are offering or what they're asking in terms of pricing, because mostly the pricing is going to be higher than resale, but you better sure as heck be paying attention to what they're doing in terms of financing, because they are flooding the market, especially in places like Texas, with absolutely phenomenal financing that's causing their $750,000 homes to have monthly payments that are equivalent of like $500,000 homes. And if you're competing against that new construction house and you're like 650 and you figure, well, that house is 100,000 more than mine. You know, my house is more desirable. Yes, it's not new. It needs some work. And you're thinking you're safe. And all of a sudden the builders competing with each other start lowering payments because they're buying down interest rates. Then you're not overpriced technically. You're just not competitive because the builders have, you know, played one of the builder cards and they're now able to offer lower payments on their products. That will completely not show up in the MLS. It's just going to show up in market data. So you have to be aware of all the variables that's going to affect the sellability of a house. And really, this also goes true on the buyer side too. A buyer is going to make a payment decision. People say housing's overpriced. Okay, I can understand why you'd say that. But really what the issue is, it's not that the housing's overpriced, the payments are too high. So if you had, for example, that house isn't worth $750,000. Okay, but what if I told you that $750,000 house is, you know, $3,000 a month? Do you care how much it is? Nope. And when interest rates drop, you're going to see that home price appreciation or home prices themselves will become less of a talking point. People are blaming the high prices, and yes, high prices with higher interest rates cause for higher payments. But when interest rates drop, and they will, then payments drop. You'll see that pricing becomes much less of a variable, especially when you consider the fact that $750,000 house, if it appreciates by say 5% this year, has gone up by nearly $40,000, and you can essentially show that seller or that buyer how the monthly payment of $3,000 or whatever the number is mostly, you know, negated by the appreciation that happened on the property. I know I'm fire hosing you guys right now, but the reality of it is remember, people buy on payment, not on price. And if the builders are undercutting the market with lower payments, your lower priced house compared to new construction is not in alignment with the buyer's expectations.
It's actually more expensive to the buyer on a monthly basis than that higher price new construction home. So coaching wise, you know, we talk to our coaching clients a lot about when you take a resale listing and you have new construction nearby, even if it's a competing school district, but basically an equal school district, you are doing your sellers a disservice to not have previewed what they are up against and to know what are those builder perks, what are the buy downs, what are the concessions, what are you actually up against? So that's some homework assignment for anytime you take a new listing that has new construction nearby.
And we do talk about that. We talked about that in the last mastermind we did. So make sure you guys are signing up to attend one of the free masterminds we're doing this week, harrismastermind.com. All right, Julie, let's go move on to point number 7. Is that right? Yes.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, stay sharp with a counteroffer cheat sheet. What do you mean by that?
That's your checklist, right? So it starts with running a new comparable market analysis to find out what the house is worth today. Maybe while it's been sitting there, you've had 3 comps that make it look like if you listed it fresh today, you're like 30,000 overpriced. Or maybe the opposite has happened and the last 3 things went for over list price. The way that you handle a counteroffer situation is completely different in those 2 scenarios. So the first thing you do is do a new market analysis. And I would caution buyer's agents as well, before you are counseling with your buyers and recommending what they should offer, you should do a comparable market analysis yourselves as well to know, should the buyer actually expect to be at 99% of list price and this house seems to be listed right? Or, you know, in the case of one of my coaching clients, typically she's got tons of inventory. Now it's typical for sellers to come down 20%, which seems outrageous, but true. Second thing is identify the buyers and sellers' top priorities. We talked about that. The using empathy to neutralize their emotions and show them what is good about the offer instead of freaking out about what, you know, coming in 5,000 less than list price. On the checklist, we talk about the reminder of maybe splitting the difference to get the deal done. I like what you added. Don't just come off your commission. Maybe you just pay for a home warranty and the seller feels like they won. And then never reject an offer outright, even if your seller freaks out, okay? You have to at least counter because as you said at the top of the podcast, don't be mad at these buyers. They're trying to buy your house. Be mad at everyone else who came through and didn't even bother to try. And then I mentioned at the end, because we've done podcasts about it and we talk about it in coaching a lot, using the ultimate addendum to counter and just make sure that the strength of the buyer is what you think it is. There was a point earlier on that we skipped where if you've got a really strong buyer, but they're not quite up to speed on the price that the seller wants, that's still a better offer than a buyer that's willing to go over a list, but isn't really that qualified. How are you going to decide who's who, especially in a multiple offer situation? So this is just something that they can get in the newsletter, and the more elaborate, of course, drilled down plan is part of Premier Coaching and certainly part of Elite Coaching. So taking a checklist, and instead of being emotional, and that's the hardest thing to do when you get these offers going back and forth, stop the emotions, get your checklist out and say, look, is this house priced right in the first place? How do we react to this? What should we expect? And I'm going to pledge not to let this deal die. You know, when we were selling real estate, sometimes it would be full list, slam dunk, easy deal, all cash. Okay. And sometimes we would go back and forth with counteroffers 4, 5, 6 times before we did get resolution and the deal did actually close.
There's a lot of other things, obviously, that go into negotiating. We have a whole section on Premier Coaching about negotiating. I mean, as Julie was talking, some of those, you know, if you guys are negotiating something that many times back and forth, chances are chattel has entered into the equation. In other words, you're arguing over personal possessions and stupid stuff like that. So if you have a buyer that's resolute on wanting, you know, specific items, don't try your best not to, you know, rugs and things like that. Things that the seller doesn't necessarily want to sell, but their buyer, sometimes you'll have buyers, they get it in their minds that they want something that's in the house because it makes the house, it's like a chandelier or something like that. Do your best not to ask for, you might be forced to ask for those things, but you've got to remember that the seller, don't ruin a deal over things like that, and try to keep the non, you know, the personal items, the chattel as it is, out of the transaction, because the other problem that happens is those things aren't going to be figured into the appraisal either.
There's a lot of states that require that chattel be a separate agreement for that reason now. Yeah.
Right. But there's so many different intricacies when it comes to negotiating. And, you know, I'm saying too many times because I'm trying to stave myself off from giving these guys more scripts because we'll go for the next 10 hours.
There's so many scenarios. I wanted to point them to a previous podcast that we talked about when this negotiating started to bubble up as the market changed. Yep. We talked about contingencies and what does that even mean? We talked about home sale contingencies. We talked about financing contingencies. We talked about home inspections. And as you said, we could drill down for hours on this because of all the transactions we did, our coaches did, and what we deal with on Premier Coaching on their live semi-private sessions that they get every single day. That's a great place to take your negotiating scenarios, especially if you get stuck. You can take those to a live coach every day of the week and say, look, we seem to be at a standstill. What should I do here? What are your suggestions on how to make this deal actually come together?
And none of this is going to work, especially when you're representing the seller, unless you fully pre-qualified them. You know their motivation, you know what they owe on the mortgage, you know what their timeframes are, because you can bring those things back into. You don't assume the seller is going to remember the fact that they have to close on their new house or move whatever in 4 months. You're going to have to remind them what the timeframes are. You're going to have to, you know, set things up so they have the ultimate desired expectation. Because if one of those things is screwed up on the back end, it's going to be your fault. If you don't get the timing worked out, if all of a sudden they have to move 45 days before their new house is done, you're going to be the one that gets blamed, and you're going to be the one that ends up paying for something that you know, would have not had to have paid for.
They'll say you should have known. You should have counseled me.
And you should have known.
Caught that.
Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. So hopefully you loved today's podcast. Remember to like and subscribe our podcast. Our YouTube channel is really taking off. We've got 130,000 or something subscribers now. However you're consuming our content, please continue to do so. We are giving you guys the best we can in 30 to 45 minutes every single day. Do us a favor, like and subscribe, share the podcast with other folks, other agents. And in the meantime, make sure you've registered for the Harris Mastermind. We're doing probably 3 of those this week. It just depends how many people register. So go to harrismastermind.com. And on the mastermind, for those of you guys who are direct messaging us over on Instagram about how to join Ethical Real Estate Professional, at the end of the mastermind, we do tell you how to go about and to become a certified ethical real estate professional agent. So more information when you attend the Harris Mastermind, just go to harrismastermind.com. In the meantime, have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow. Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. Remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.